Hey, Gator Nation. Welcome back to the Respect Our Decision podcast. As always, I'm your boy Hirsch, and with me is the hype man Wes,
What's good? What's good, Gator Nation?
CJ the man McCann,
What's going on, guys?
and our special guest tonight, guys, from Gators on 3. And of course, you know him from the Stadium and Gale podcast, Nick De La Torre. Nick, how's it going, brother?
Going well. Got to see another Florida Gator win over Florida State. I've seen a lot of those in 10 years covering that baseball program up in Jacksonville. And if you haven't been there, that's a beautiful park to go watch a game at. So head up to Jacksonville.
It's actually quicker for me to get to Jacksonville than it is to Gainesville. I might have to do that next year.
It's right there. I mean, it's behind right field. You see, what are they calling that? Whatever sponsor sent the last check to the city of Jacksonville to put their name on the football stadium is right there. They share a parking lot.
Yes, sir. Guys, as always, make sure you check us out wherever you get your podcast from. We're available on all major providers. And as always, guys, if you're not already, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Hit the notification bell so you get a notification every time we drop new comment. Drop a like on the video and leave us a comment, man. Tell us how we're doing, what you think of the show. Tell us our takes are wrong, even if you want to. I mean, hey, that's what we're here for. And as always, guys, make sure you go and check out our friends at Alma Mater. The link will be in the description of the video, guys. Go ahead and support a good Gator business that also supports our Gator athletes at Alma Mater. Check that link out. It'll be in the description below. Nick, man, we're going to jump right into it, man. It's been a good week for Florida football, kind of on some fronts, bad on some others. We got us a commitment yesterday from R.J. Moten, former of the Michigan State Wolverines. Looks like we finally maybe got ourselves some safety help in here to compete for the starting job. What's your take on R.J. Moten, man? Are you happy with this pickup?
Yeah, I think it's a room. So at this point in the transfer portal, everyone's going to have warts. You know, you're not getting a perfect player in the portal. So you can point to, well, he wasn't great at tackling last year. It's like, okay, well, where's Jarvis Moss in the transfer portal? Where's, Major Wright in the transfer portal? They're not there. So you've got to find something that fits your needs and something that makes your football team better. What did you need in the safety room? You need a veteran leadership. R.J. Moten has more games than Miguel Mitchell and Kamari Wilson combined have together. So you feel that role immediately. This is a guy who's played high Power 5 football, was on a team that went to the national championship last year, or the college football playoff last year. And a guy who will come in, and if he doesn't win a starting job, gives you veteran leadership in a room that desperately needs it. I mean, after Miguel Mitchell and Kamari Wilson, you've got just true freshmen, really. Jadarius Perkins is listed as a safety, but I think he's a guy that will play nickel along with Jaden Hill. So you just needed veteran leadership. So I think it's a cool story with his dad and him being a legacy. I think he's a good player, and he fills a huge need. I don't know if he's a first team all SEC player. Like, I don't know if you're going to get the same kind of impact that Ricky Pearsall gave you. But if I would have done this podcast this time last year, I didn't think I'd be talking about Ricky Pearsall in the way that I'm talking about him now either. So he could surprise us, but I think this is a really good commitment for Florida just because it filled such a big need, and I think he will contend for a starting spot at safety.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, the biggest thing to take away with him is the experience. I mean, there's no one in that room that has this amount of experience. The knocks on him are maybe he's a poor tackler, but he's great in coverage. So, to maybe challenge Kamari at that free safety spot, which we know Kamari may not have the foot speed. His coverage could be questionable at best. I mean, we really don't know yet. We don't know what kind of step forward he's going to take. You got Corey Raymond coaching that room this year, so he's going to get good guidance. It's a great pickup in my eyes. I mean, just to get the experience in that room and to have somebody to challenge those young guys. But if we're going to talk about the good, we need to talk about the bad for a minute. And obviously this week we saw Josh Simmons, the offensive tackle out of San Diego State, went ahead and committed to Ohio State. This was a guy the Gators were banking on to try to add to that offensive line room. And we know we're short a few bodies. There's been some injuries, obviously, with Waits and Michael Mazuka, are amongst others that we dealt with during the spring. And it brought up a lot of questions about how we were approaching this portal cycle, and Billy waiting what it seemed like for the portal to close for us to go after people. I saw your comments with Zach on y'all's podcast and your take on what we were doing here. I just want to get into that for a second for our listeners. You're very questionable about their strategy with this cycle, aren't you?
Yeah, and I think people ran with it and were like, see, it probably depends on what your perspective is. If your perspective is Billy stinks, it was a bad hire, fire Jeremy, fire Billy, clean house, then you probably heard what I said and you were like, see, Nick's saying it too. I think that they have an unbelievable 2020 start to the 2024 high school recruiting class. I think if you look 3 years in a row, Billy's gotten an elite high school quarterback to commit to him. Obviously, what happened with Jaden Rashada didn't work out, but then you get DJ Lagway and Austin Simmons, and we'll get into baseball later, but I've just started watching Austin Simmons pitching. This kid you might want to get him on the campus soon, because this kid might have draft eligible stuff from the left side on the map.
90 plus already, isn't he?
Yeah, he's 90 and 94. I've seen him top 95. His stuff plays. He
took a jump from like throwing 80, 86, 88 to 93, 94, which is a tremendous jump, man.
I watched a couple, and I mean, everyone says they watch tape. I mean, they're highlights. They're being put together by the coaches. They're highlights, but I'm watching him, and I'm like, the stuff plays. So I text Dr. Willman, who's the recruiting coordinator for baseball. He's like, yeah, no, this kid can pitch. So might be a true two-sport guy. But my problem with getting back to it, I'm easily distracted. Getting back to it, my issue was you have such a big staff. And Florida, the administration, OAA, has never given a football coach this kind of money to have a staff like this. It's one of the biggest staffs in the country. To me, if you have people this big of a staff, I get that you want to, and Billy Napier said tonight in Sarasota that you have your evaluation period. That's cool. You have so many people. Those evaluations shouldn't be waiting until somebody pops into the portal. And if you're waiting, like the example I used on the podcast, Caleb Williams, is he going to transfer? No. Should you have a file ready in case Caleb Williams wants to transfer? Yeah, he's going to be the number one quarterback. Yeah, we're ready in case he wants to transfer and something happens and he wants to come to Florida. We're ready for that. And you have the Army to do that. And so that was my question: was why is it? Billy Napier had called this the transfer portal kind of speed dating, specifically this second window when it's only open for 15 days. And it did not seem like he was on, a Netflix dating show. It seemed like he was, courting somebody back in the 1800s, and it was a long dating process. So that was my issue. Yeah, that was my issue.
It was sending ravens.
yeah. And mom and dad had to sit in on the first date in the living room too. So that was my problem with it. But if you look at the roster, like, they understand the importance of the transfer portal. And even if you don't want to give him credit for the UL guys, you still have Ricky Pearsall. You still have Micah Mazuka, Keontae Goodwin. You still have a bunch of guys who I think and I consider some of the better players on your roster from the transfer portal. So I think I did not intend to start the fire that I started. I only had an issue with their strategy for this 2-week period. I wasn't saying that they were incompetent or anything. It was a deliberate strategy, and I didn't agree with and don't agree with the strategy. My job isn't on the line for this strategy. So they're doing it. They believe in it. Anytime a coach makes a strategy or a plan, they're putting their job on the line because it's a talent acquisition business. If you misplace something and you don't get enough talent and you don't win enough games, then you're not going to be here. So they strongly believe in it. And I think I was just voicing my opinion that I didn't agree with the strategy for this 2-week period. But Billy Napier did say today that they tried to get guys in. He said, listen, it's the University of Florida. My words, not his. It's not Marshall. It's hard to get in. They've tried to get guys in the first transfer portal window, specifically a quarterback who couldn't get into the University of Florida.
Wow,
and that's going to be an issue.
We know. I got an idea. I think most Gator fans know who you're talking about there. The young man that went back to his school because his transcripts were he might have spelled his name wrong on his transcripts from
or Cran.
Let me ask you this, Nick, because we talked about this on our question show, our Pod of the People. Do you think, it's been said over and over again that Billy Napier adapts. He's really good at adapting. Mm-hmm. Is he having to adapt too much? Like, are we seeing this kind of thing happen a little too often?
Well, to me, it's everyone is still learning. And Florida was like, what happened with John Ruiz in Florida last year. First off, NIL was unprecedented. And then you had a super booster who just was like, yeah, sure, I would rather burn money than have good players go to the University of Florida. So Florida not only was learning as it was learning how to adapt and change to NIL being legal and the transfer portal, but then had a rival school have a super booster being like, hey, we have this NIL offer for you if you don't go to Florida and commit to us right now and just stay here. So if I think Florida through unprecedented times and everyone's adapting, but not everyone was having to compete with John Ruiz for an entire portal period. I think also that Florida, looking at the way that Dan, in my opinion, Dan Mullen won with a bunch of Jim McElwain players, and then started to lose with his players and wasn't recruited, which is part of the reason why he was relieved of his duties. And when I look at the roster, Florida wasn't competing with Georgia, LSU, and Texas A&M and Alabama. And now your roster, you're being catch. So I think the portal affords you some chance to catch up quicker, to run a little faster. They're going to be deliberate and get their guys in. So everyone is adapting. I think maybe we, the fans, as well as me, did not fully grasp how long and how big of a rebuild that this might be. And I think Billy did, because he was preaching patience from his opening press conference, wearing a suit until, drenched in sweat after games, preaching patience. And I think that it's hard to come by, especially when you have back-to-back losing seasons, even if one of them is for you.
Yeah, I know this is something Wes wants to probably hit on too, and I'm going to kind of throw it out there. Talking about patience, how much patience do we need to have with the two offensive line coaches in our recruiting efforts right now?
That's an issue. So if I don't see Billy Napier going away from having two offensive line coaches. I think that, if you have pillars of your program, I think that's one of them. I think for hearing him talk tonight, I think another one of them would be that their evaluation process. Me saying, hey, I think you're messing up these last 2 weeks. It's like, I'm going to stop saying that, because I think that's a pillar of his program. So I don't see them changing that. So I don't know if I'm going to start yelling about it. But you need, and Rob Sales is guy. He's been that for a while, kind of like Dan Mullen and John Hevesy. Like, I don't know that Billy Napier will get rid of Rob Sale or Darnell Stapleton. I think Florida and Billy Napier specifically sees a lot of value in having two offensive line coaches. A bunch of the recruits that I've talked to, that Corey Bender, Keith Niebuhr have talked to, have said the same thing, that it's super unique and that they like that. I think offensive line's a tough position, though. There's so much projection into it. You're almost like a baseball scout looking at a 14-year-old pitcher throwing 83 miles an hour, and you're like, well, he's lanky and he can do this, and he'll throw 98 by the time he's 20. There's so much projection. I remember going to watch Martez Ivy play a high school game and looking at him, and then they didn't throw the ball at all. And he was 130 pounds bigger than anyone that else was on the field. I'm like, yeah, he looks great, but he's playing against me as defense end. He should look great. So even those 5-star guys will take some time. So I think they value the teaching that they get, the development that they get from those two guys, more so than anything else. And whenever I hear or get questions about how we're going to have offensive line coaches, I'm assuming that's a way to ask if there's going to be an offensive coordinator brought in.
Wes, you got a question for Nick?
Yeah, I'm gonna venture a little bit away from recruiting, and there's been a lot of talk about Armstrong and the energy he brings, and as far as the scheme being the same as what Patrick Toney had. So, what are the differences though? That there's been a lot of talk about the similarities of the scheme and everything being the same. What have you heard or what have you seen as far as maybe things that are different? Because I know me as a fan and a lot of other fans and everybody that's following and watching all Gator football, we want to see some changes. We okay with the scheme being the same, being that he came in the second half of the year, doing spring and all of that, but we want to see a lot of differences because we felt like the team, the defense was more passive than aggressive as a lot of past Gator defenses. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I think they both learned, and they're both from the Ron Roberts tree. Ron was the defense coordinator for Billy at Louisiana from 18 to 19, and then I think he went to Baylor, and he's at Auburn now. So that's where Patrick and Austin both kind of get a lot of their calls, their schemes, and their philosophies and thought processes on defense. It's from Ron Roberts. So that's where the similarities are. I think the biggest thing that will be the difference this year is I don't think that Patrick Toney and Corey Raymond saw eye to eye on coverages and things like that. I think that if Patrick Toney's defense and as a young guy, he didn't want it to be, well, yeah, you had a good defense, but Corey Raymond was doing this and that. He wanted to have the final say. And a lot of coverages, I think, I even questioned Jason Marshall last, thinking, did we just say he was like, did we just build him up too high? But maybe he's just a press man corner and they weren't allowed to play press man last year. And he's off and he's playing zone and now he looks terrible. And I don't think that's what the kind of defense and coverage that Corey wanted to call. So I think the biggest thing that we'll see with Corey taking all of the secondary, I think you'll see his thoughts and his suggestions to be taken more into account for the game plan. Austin's a young guy, super energetic. I think they're going to be very aggressive, and you'll see blitzing from a lot of places. We were told for the spring game, hey, it's going to be a vanilla defense. They're not going to do a lot of crazy stuff. And then the first drive, I'm like, they just brought 6. They just brought 7. Like, what do you mean? Whoever told me this had no idea what the game plan was. Like, he's coming for him. So it'll be interesting. I think the defense is better. It's a baseball terminology, but you have to be good up the middle. When we're talking about defense, I think at defensive tackle, nose tackle, you've gotten a lot better. A couple better players, but the biggest thing is, Gervon Dexter played the 3rd most snaps of any player on defense last year as a defensive tackle. That's wild. You can't have 330-pound men playing 65, 70 snaps a game. They're gonna run out of gas, and people were questioning Gervon. And towards the end of the season, I'm like, well, that's his 500th snap of the year. He's probably a little tired. So I think the rotation you'll be able to have with Cam and Desmond and Banks and those guys, Chris McClellan in the middle, you should keep them fresh at linebacker. I probably still question how guys are going to be in coverage, but I really like Trahaja Mitchell. And I like Shamar James. I think Scooby had looked good in the spring game after kind of bouncing around in the spring. And then my biggest question was at safety. I think you got a little bit better there through the transfer portal. And I really do like Miguel Mitchell. I think he's going to be a great player. And I love his skill set. So for me, Florida's gotten better up the middle on defense this year, and that should help them overall.
Yeah, Nick, I asked Connor this while he was on the show, and I'm going to ask you, as far as like recruiting goes, who's a guy that isn't on the radar that's flying real low that you're really high on that you'd like to speak about? Is there anybody that you've seen like, man, this guy isn't getting enough praise? I hope we really get this guy.
In terms of recruiting,
yeah,
on the team. Man, I'm not sure that I know one that I can pull off the top of my head. Yeah, I'm not sure if I can pull one out off the top of my head. I think there's one. I forget. I'm blanking on his name. The running back from West Palm, or from Palm Beach. That's committed
to us.
Yes.
Oh, Bowens.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've been on that train since day one. That kid.
Yeah, I was walking out of one of our meetings and ran into one of the football coaches, and apparently he is a very good chess player. Also, I think speaks. The coach said Chinese, but I'm guessing that's Mandarin. So a really intelligent young man. But I mentioned, I was like, yeah, it seems like no one's talking about Chauncey Bowens, and I think he's really good based on what I've seen. And the coach was like, yeah, just please stop talking about him. So I apologize for bringing him up now.
Yeah,
but I think that's a really
kid's
good
running
player.
back one and has been, I think, the whole time.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see how many running backs that Florida takes, because I think you will lose. Oh, Cam Carroll's out. I think you lose Montrell Johnson after this year. So you really only have two. Do you take two? Do you take three? I think it'll be interesting to see. Or do you take one and look for something else in the portal? So I think that's an interesting position.
They already, I mean, we know they offered the kid out of Houston that hit the portal this cycle. I mean, so they're obviously looking to try to add one more of experience to that room. And like you said, I can't blame them. You're going to have a very young room next year. I mean, now I'm sure, I could see Trayon getting some carries this year, in mop-up duties, or, hopefully nobody gets hurt and we have to play him. But, it's inevitable that he'll get some burn as well, the way that Billy uses the running backs. Nick,
I would think like 80%, 85 might be a little high between Montrell and Trev. I don't know that I haven't been super impressed with Montrell as a pass catcher, and I think you might have to get the running involved in the game plan more. And I think that's kind of where Cam Carroll and Trayon Webb, as well as ETN, kind of separate themselves from Montrell a little bit, is just in terms of being a receiver in the passing game out of the backfield.
Well, I know we sure all have been very impressed just in the limited sample size that we've got out of Carroll so far, just because he's such a physical specimen out there on the field. And
he made me look stupid. I was like, I don't know why a kid with 1 year of eligibility would show up to this running back room with
it was a puzzle.
Johnson. I was like, I don't get it. I asked Jabbar Jalouk, I was like, what the heck? You tell the guy, like, it makes no sense for him to be here. And then I watched him and I talked to people who were at scrimmages, and I'm like, okay, that makes sense. Yeah, no, he'll get 60, 70 carries this year.
Well, people don't realize when Naquan was getting a lot of carries before he fell out of rotation. It was Naquan, then Montrell, then Etienne, and then his struggles happened, and then that's when it went to just the two backs. So he'll get his fair share if he produces. With you got to show what you get. So if you get opportunities, if he makes the best of them, I can see him in the rotation very well. But
hopefully, like you said, everyone just stays healthy.
My question, another question I had before. I don't know when we go get to baseball, and I want to ask this.
We got time.
It's all over recruiting. I'm not recruiting. It's all over in the timelines everywhere. Everybody's panicking about the quarterback position. I'm not saying Mertz is going to throw for. He's not going to be Kyle Trask. I'm not saying that, or Joe Burrow. I'm not saying that. But do you think, because my projection is defense is going to be a whole lot better, and I feel like we have good backs if the O-line stays healthy and comes together, and Sale and Stapleton do what they can do with the O-line. If we run the ball well, do you think this team can win 8 games with Mertz at quarterback? With the schedule too, we have a tough schedule as well.
No, I think 8 would be like everything went perfectly. Graham Mertz, like my message board it flames me for this. They asked me about Graham Mertz early on in the spring, and I said he's fine. He's unoffensive. He's okay. He is not going to win, an all SEC award. He's not going to be a Heisman contender. He's serviceable. Then someone's like, "Oh, Stetson Bennett is serviceable." I'm like, "Yeah, that's cool," because Stetson Bennett played on a team full of 5 stars from the last 7 classes. He just needed
that all
to
got
exist.
drafted.
He just needed to exist. Yeah, Stetson Bennett played on the Philadelphia Eagles essentially. So Graham Mertz in Florida doesn't have that around him. I think Graham Mertz is just okay. If you look at his stats, his completion percentage got worse every single year he was at Wisconsin. So the people that didn't like Anthony Richardson and hated Anthony, and they're like, well, if Graham can throw 6 slant, he's better. I'm like, all right, well, Graham also can't erase a bad call or great coverage from the other team with an 80-yard touchdown run, which Anthony did. So ultimately, I think Florida, and before last season, I said I think Florida needs to run like 65-35, 70-30. Like they need to be a run team. I think that's even more so this year because I love the running back room. Loved the offensive line before there were injuries, and then I realized that didn't have the depth I thought they did, and that's not a position that stays healthy frequently or for long stretches. So I think it's going to be important for Florida to get an offensive lineman in the transfer portal. Maybe if you can get a starter, great, but someone for depth. And when I look at that schedule, I mean, there's just a run towards the end there, like after Georgia, that's just brutal. I think on the road at Utah's brutal. It'll be interesting to see what does Cam Rising look like. He tore his ACL on January 1st in the Rose Bowl. Even if he does play, is he Cam Rising? First game, 8 months after knee surgery. So, no, I've been down on Florida. I think 6-6, 7-5 again. But you look at the schedule, there's just a bunch of games where they're going to be underdogs in. And I think if Graham Mertz can't at least make you respect him as a passer, and Florida can't figure out ways to make defenses respect him as a passer, then you're not running the ball effectively because you're going to have to run the ball against a stacked box. So I think Graham Mertz is fine. I think he's going to be an okay quarterback. I think he's okay. Like Florida didn't. I think Grayson McCall would have made Florida's offense a lot better than Graham Mertz will. But I've definitely been low on Graham Mertz since seeing him in the spring. Maybe lower than I need to be, but it's just my opinion.
Nick, who? I mean, obviously we've heard reports, but you saw a lot of this action personally. Who are some young guys that are really going to make their mark this year?
I love Andy Jean. Really think he is. I got to think of myself, and I was like, he reminds me of Antonio Callaway and Van Jefferson. And then I realized, I think I tweeted that out, and I was like, those are large shoes that you just dropped off.
Set yourself up for complete bookmarks.
Yes, like, hey, I need to find Andy's number. Like, hey, man, I really need you to play well this year. Just for the sake.
Hey, by the way,
just for my sake.
I don't want to get trolled.
By the way, I'm going to get roasted if you have 7 catches this year. So I'm going to need you to do some stuff.
I need you to at least hit that 3,700 mark. And
yeah. I think he's really good. He's super polished. He's still a young guy, but I think especially with Xavier Henderson leaving, I think he's going to have an opportunity to get some playing time. I really, really like him. And then he's kind of a young guy, but kind of not. And we really still haven't seen him. I love him more and his potential. Obviously had the shoulder injury that kept him out all last year, or not all last year, but for more than half the season. And then they kind of were protecting him this spring, keeping him in a non-contact jersey. But I think he's a guy who can tend to start across from Jason Marshall at cornerback. To me, that's one that I'm really excited about. And I like Castell and Bryce Thornton. And maybe it's a soft spot for Bryce Thornton because I think if he wasn't 5'10", that he probably would have been a 5-star. But the kid just has instincts. He's crazy athletic. And I was just talking with somebody the other day. They were talking about Trading and Rashad Torrance 40 times. I'm like, I'm a black runner 4.7, but he had instincts. He knew how to play football. He knew where to be. And I see a lot of that from Bryce Thornton. I think he's just a really smart safety, a really smart football player.
Let me ask you one more.
Too.
Let me ask you about one more kid in the wake of Powell transferring out. Do you think we see TJ Searcy play this year?
Yeah. So the big question for me with Searcy was, well, are you only able to be in the package for 3rd and 15? Like, you know what I mean? Like, are you only a guy that we can say, hey, you have to go get a quarterback? Like, they're definitely not running. So all season long, I saw Mike P working with him, setting the edge. And we need to make you a player that we can put in on 1st down and 2nd down. We don't want you to only be a one-trick pony this first year. And I just kept seeing him get better and learn leverages and learn what he's supposed to do against the runner. It wasn't just a blonde raid, hair on fire, go get the quarterback. So I think that's big. And I think TJ Searcy's the guy, and Kelby Collins is another guy that I would expect to play. And I like talking about TJ because we always talked about Kelby and Will. And TJ was kind of like, also ran, in the election. Didn't get talked about. But yeah, I saw a lot of progression from him. We all know that he can get to the quarterback, in high school. But I saw a lot of progression of him to round out his game. And he's not there yet, but definitely taking strides.
Yeah, that's just a kid that, if you follow along real closely with things you heard a lot about, was impressing coaches in the weight room and with his practice habits and things of that nature. CJ, you got another question about Nick with football before we move on?
Yeah. What's the really the most encouraging thing that you've seen in the program this thus far? Maybe not this year. Like maybe this year it's just kind of doomed. It's just kind of it's just not built, to make a run this year. But like what's your encouraging thought to go beyond maybe 24, 25?
I would say 2022 was year 0. That was if you bought a house that was crumbling, so you ripped everything down. There was a crack in the foundation. Now we're laying cement. Florida's not going to compete for an SEC championship in my vision this year. I don't think they have the roster to do that. What I think is encouraging, a couple things. First, the second transfer portal window. Couple guys enter, 3 of them do. That tells me even after guys go through spring and see, hey, I'm 3rd, I'm 4th, they've bought in. There aren't a bunch of guys leaving. And you saw that all over the place of guys leaving. The other one is I think that they've got high school recruit down. As much as I bragged on them this 1-2 week stretch, I think they've got high school recruiting down. I've talked about this and asked this question. I still don't know the answer. When was the last time that Florida had a quarterback like DJ Lagway, someone as talented as him, committed this early in a cycle and then going out and actively trying to build a class around him? You can't even say Tebow, because Tebow went all the way down until signing day. And it was Alabama, Florida, all the way down. It was late. Now you have the famous story of Brandon Spike saying, I'm going to go wherever he goes. But DJ Lagway has been committed for months, and he might as well be getting a check from the UAA because he recruits like he's on staff.
We say it all the time. He's got an Airbnb already in Gainesville. But as much
we started calling him PJ DJ. He's got frequent flyer miles from Houston all the way to Gainesville. So to me, whatever Ryan O'Hara and Billy Napier are telling elite high school quarterbacks, those high school quarterbacks are buying it. So to me, you might get your teeth kicked in. Last year, I equate last year, and I think we'd all have a different perspective if the Vanderbilt game didn't happen. I think last year is, if you equate it to like a hike, you start this hike and you're excited. Hey, we're getting some exercise. Beautiful day. Hike starts great. You beat Utah. All of a sudden it starts raining. You lose to Kentucky. You look terrible against USF. You lose to Tennessee. Now this hike sucks. At the end of the season, at the end of the hike, you're like, all right, I'm glad I did. We got some exercise. It wasn't the best, but it's almost over. You get down to the parking lot, you get to your car, and then a skunk turns and sprays you. That was the Vanderbilt loss. So now you're You're driving home and you just smell it. You smell like skunk. And if you beat Vanderbilt, you probably go to a different bowl game. Maybe you have more guys playing that bowl game. Maybe you're 7-5 instead of 6-7. And we're talking completely differently about this team. It's just that Vanderbilt game just puts a stench on the entire season. So to me, my encouraging things are the recruiting class. And even if Florida goes, let's say 5-7 and misses a bowl game, this recruiting class has a potential to be a top 3 class in the country. And then to me, that symbolizes it doesn't matter what the record is. The program trajectory to me then looks good because the players I think that are the best on the team are guys that Billy Napier's brought in. And then that recruiting class shows me that you can compete with Georgia, you can compete with Alabama, LSU, A&M, Clemson, those teams. So to me, I don't care about wins and losses. I would love for Florida to win. I would love to go to the college football playoff. That'd be fantastic. Would love to cover that. But to me, it's a long-term rebuild, and I love what this coaching staff is doing in terms of recruiting at the high school level.
I couldn't agree more with that. I mean, I know a lot of people, they're going to, we have this naysayers, they're going to nitpick whatever he does regardless. It doesn't matter. Kanan Daniels is he's a wildcat quarterback. He's not a running back. You have that, why don't we have receivers yet? Why don't we have tight ends? When are we going to get a tight end commitment? And they're valid questions, but I'm going to at least let us get through Friday Night Lights before I form that kind of opinion. Wes, you got anything else you want to add before we let these guys talk a little baseball?
Nah, I got a couple of baseball questions for Nick.
Oh my Lord, what is going on here?
How was my let me get a question in. How's my skunk story?
That's great.
Solid.
It's good.
That's up there with me telling people that they needed to take their medicine and it tastes like S.
Yeah,
and you're just gonna have to take it.
I don't know if you saw the clip, but we talked about that a couple of weeks ago, and CJ equated the program to something like you did, that you bought something and it was rotted, and you had to peel back the layers and get to the rot,
right,
and rebuild through it, and it takes time, and you don't like that, We're already, nobody's going to pass us off like the Florida Gators fan base is reasonable.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not a reasonable fan base, and we have reasons for not being reasonable. We've tasted the highest level multiple times in our lifetime, and it sucks to not be there. It sucks in the social media age because now we have FSU Twitter is up because they had one good season. Georgia's been up for 3-4 years. Bama doesn't even look at us.
Miami's delusional.
So we're basically
still playing.
We're trolling with Miami over recruiting wins and losses and who did, and it sucks. I get it.
Yeah.
But if you want to get back to that elite status, you're just gonna have to tolerate the.
You can't keep hitting the. I mean, I grew up a Florida fan. My parents went here. I never thought when I started covering the University of Florida in 2013 that I would be covering my fourth football coach.
Yeah.
In 10 years. So like you can't become Tennessee where you're just not working 3 years, hit the reset button, because all you're doing is just resetting it and you're restarting that clock.
And you're piling garbage on top of garbage. You
have to make some tough decisions, but like when they made Will Muschamp, hey, the pro style's not working, we need to go spread. Well, that's just a last ditch Hail Mary effort. You've now recruited for 4 years for a system, and you're like, hey, those big 340-pound offensive linemen you have, well, we need to play spread now. He's like, well, that's not what they do. Like, better win some games or else you're getting fired this year.
What offensive lineman?
They had DJ Humphries, didn't they? He was a 5-star.
Yeah, that's the thing is you only look at the stars. You don't look if they fit the scheme or the system. I mean, you look at the offensive lineman recruiting now. I love to see that we're recruiting 320-pound, 6'7" kids with the wingspan that goes from center to to tackle.
Basically, I kind of set CJ up for that when he went off, but basically what I said when he went on his excellent rant, was that people don't have to understand that the program was broken. It's broken. We're not 2008, 2006. That's not us anymore. I know we think that and we're entitled and we want to feel privileged that we should get these 5 stars over here and there, but we're broken. And CJ took that and he just rolled off with it.
Yeah, I
he
mean,
made
we got people talking about where they want to put the furniture and the house ain't even built yet. You know,
Yes.
I think that's the main problem is people are just they want to be back. We want to be back so bad. We all do. I mean, I get that.
Austin Simmons was 1 year old when Florida won a national championship in 2006. Like that's not where the program is, and the kids you're recruiting don't remember that either.
No, they don't.
But you sold that young man on a vision and got him excited. And I mean, you watch that. So that tells you right now that Billy Napier can recruit his vision to Florida.
Yes.
He sold it to Lagway. He sold it to Simmons. I mean, I know he's out there selling it to the Jeremiah Smiths of the world.
Billy Napier beat out USC and Lincoln Riley for DJ Lagway. Lincoln Riley is able to show you, hey, number one pick, Heisman.
Dabo Swinney, Clemson.
Billy Napier out recruited those guys. Out recruited a guy who is able to show you college football playoff trophies, Heisman trophies. Billy Napier doesn't have that at Florida under him. So whatever he's selling to these quarterbacks, like I said, it's working. And you have to have a quarterback. You see it all across the country, except for Georgia, who had an entire NFL roster on their team
and a bench full of 5-star quarterbacks.
You either got to have a quarterback or you got to have everything else.
Yes.
All right, guys. Well, we're going to move on from a program, obviously, that's not quite there yet, to a program that is very close once again. And, of course, that's the Gator baseball team. And I'm going to step back and I'm going to let you guys just talk it out, because I mean I'm got my Jack Caglione t-shirt here, and all that, but other than that, I'm a little deaf, dumb, and blind about as far as the baseball team goes.
I'm gonna save my questions for after y'all have y'all.
So CJ, I'm gonna let you take the reins here, buddy.
I'll go ahead and get just started. Nick, you've covered a lot of the guys that are in the major league now that you're talking, like Alonzo and Bader and India. Where does the guys like Wyatt Langford and Jack Caglione stack up? Are they're on that level, or are they above that level?
I think it's so funny talking to my buddy Jacob Rudner, who he started last year. He's like, who's some of the best players you've seen? I'm like I've been covering SEC baseball for a decade. I've seen a lot of great players.
Right.
I think the best player, the two best, I'll do three best. They're all pitchers. My favorite was Logan Shore. Shore took over pitching on Friday nights as a freshman. And when I went to the park on Friday night, I knew a couple things. One, the game was going to be under 3 hours, 100%. Two, he was not giving up more than 4 runs. And Florida was going to have a chance to win, because that's just what Logan Shore did. The other two, Brady Singer, Alex Faedo. I loved Mike Rivera. I played catcher in outfield, so I have a soft spot for catchers. I think Wyatt Langford has potential, when I sit back and think about it, to be put into that kind of group. The year that he had last year and what he's doing this year is just incredible. And Jack Caglione, I would put him in terms of raw power. I would put him up there with Pete. I remember at the old McKeithen Stadium, Pete hit a home run. I used to call it the graveyard between the foul poles in center field, because where home runs went to die. And Pete hit a home run that hit the TV tower out there. And I asked him about it. He goes, I've been waiting to do that for 3 years, because the ball just didn't carry there. And today I was talking to somebody. Jack Caglione hit a home run today off batting practice. So it's a pitching machine, 55 miles an hour over the scoreboard, which means he had to supply the power, because the ball's not coming in any harder than me or Hirsch could throw it there. So in terms of raw power, I think he can get it there. He's got to figure some stuff out on the mound. His walk per 9 is I think over 5, close.
And do you
6.
just relate all that to the Tommy Johns? Getting control back.
I think
he's got the speed.
Yeah. And the biggest thing too. So Jack, what's really impressed me about Jack is he couldn't hit a changeup. It was getting murdered by changeups the first 2 weeks. Miami comes in, they know it. Now he's got some tape. They got a book on him. Throws a changeup, boom, home run. The way he studies the game, studies himself and how his opponents are attacking him, I think is so beyond what I've seen from freshmen and sophomores. It's such a mature approach. And I think he's had that approach as a pitcher as well, because his first start, he's all juiced up, 100 miles an hour, 99. I'm like, if you're the closer, you can do that, but you're not going to last to the 7th doing that, especially 17 months removed from Tommy John. So when you see him, he's throwing 93 to 95. Hey, I'll live 93, 95. You're 6'4", 6'5", left-handed. You don't need to throw 99. 94 is fine if you can locate it, but he's not. The other thing is, I think he needs to, and I don't know, I don't know how to tell anyone to do this, but he tore his UCL with his throwing his cutter, and just the way that he grips. I don't have a baseball here, but the way that he grips his cutter, he just puts a ton of pressure on that middle finger. And if you did that and you were holding it, you can feel everything in your forearm kind of tense up. So I think if I tore my UCL, I'd probably not want to throw the pitch that I tore it on. Yeah. So I think he needs to mentally kind of get over that, because it's another pitch which will give him 4 in his arsenal, and make him a better pitcher. But like to your original question, control is kind of the last thing that comes back, and command, last thing that comes back after Tommy John for guys.
So we're looking at the mound in general. We've got, Sproat, who's the Friday night guy. I remember getting the text message from somebody that said Sproat's coming back. And this was like a month or two. This was like right after he got drafted by the Mets. And I was shocked. I was like, really? He's coming back?
Yeah.
Because I couldn't believe that. And Sproat has been pretty good this year. He's had a couple of games where not great, just bad nights. But as a Friday night guy, I don't think he gets enough credit. I mean, a lot of that's to do, though, with my guy, Hurston Waldrop, my hometown. True. I watched him pitch. He throws a splitter better than anybody else in baseball. What are you seeing from the mound? And then talk a little bit, too, about Neely. Neely was a guy that I expected to be in the starting rotation this year. I saw him throw a no-hitter against Arkansas through 7 innings last year. I really expected him to be a guy that was going to be in the rotation. Just talk a little bit more about the pitching rotation at Florida and what you like, especially from a guy that like Waldrop, who's going to be in the first round with Wyatt Langford this year.
Yeah, Waldrop should be a top 15 pick. Wyatt Langford should be a top 10 pick. Brandon Sproat will be drafted in the first 3 rounds. I think Josh Rivera goes in the top 5 rounds. On the mound, you're missing a 6'8" left-handed pitcher who was one of the best pitchers in the country 2 cycles ago in Pierce Capalla.
I was going to ask you about Capalla too, with his injury too, because he was projected to be a top 8 pick in his class with in the 24 class.
I think if Pierce was healthy, he would be your son. He would have been the Sunday starter from the beginning of the year. You're also missing Jake Clemente, who's also out with a shoulder injury, from Stoneman Douglas, who won back-to-back national championships in high school. He's a guy who throws 95 miles an hour, an 18-year-old. So as good as Florida's pitching staff has been, and people are like, the bullpen stinks. I'm like, you're missing 2 guys who would have had a huge role, and you haven't seen him pitch at all this year. Any weekend you go in, you have to feel good about winning 2 games if you're Florida. With Brandon and Hurston. It's really interesting to me, and this might be nerdy baseball, but curveballs are kind of coming back, but everyone really throws fastball, slider, and everyone's got that. It's really unique that both of Florida's 1 and 2, their secondary pitch is not a slider. They're both 95 to 99 fastballs, and then Sproat has a nasty changeup, and Waldrop's go-to pitch is that splitter, which is filthy. Filthy. So that's interesting. Both guys have 4 or 5 pitch arsenals too. But you're getting a completely different look than what guys are used to. Waldrop's, I think, getting close to, if not already at 100 strikeouts, and has been dominant. The only thing is, and I went back and I crunched the numbers, and it's not just the bullpen. Everyone has been walking guys. This is the worst walk to 9 ratio that Kevin O'Sullivan's ever had. It's up near 5 per 9. So that's the biggest thing. But to me, the starting rotation, especially if you can get Jack in there, Brandon Neely, I don't think, wink, wink, I don't think that he was happy with his role, because you never expected, like you said, Brandon Sproat to come back, which meant Neely was going to be Friday night guy or Saturday night guy. Then Sproat comes back and you get Waldrop. And now you're competing with 3 guys and you lose out to them. And now you're asked to not be a starter and to pitch out of the bullpen. But he has filled that role. He needs to stop yelling, come on, because some
How dare he? How
dare you celebrate your success?
How dare you strike your rival out?
But Florida's got an unbelievable, and I totally understand Kevin O'Sullivan's frustration because your 3 starting pitcher, or definitely your Friday and Saturday guys, can give you 6, maybe 7. And Neely's a starter, kind of like Michael Byrne. Neely's a starter that just has been put into a closer role. Brandon Neely can give you 4 innings on a weekend. You're really looking for 3 innings from the bullpen,
right?
Just to piece together, to bridge something. So I feel like the bullpen gaslights me every time I want to quit on them. They come out, and last night Blake Purnell shoves. Nick Fick looked good, but I feel like the bullpen's gaslighting me.
Yeah, it's wild because like we'll do it here. I'll talk about guys like Abner. Abner went on a run, and I love Abner. Phil's great. Phil on the hill, baby.
One L Phil on the hill.
I mean, and he'll he had like what a .54 ERA in high school, just an absolute nasty. And that's a lot of the guys in the bullpen were just great high school prospects. It's not like these guys didn't jump off the page in high school. What is missing in the bullpen in your mind? Like what's going on there to where they can look so great and so dominant for one series, and the same guy will come out like Cleat last night. Cleat had a really bad inning, but Cleat had been pretty solid in most of his starts. So what are you seeing from the bullpen that's kind of been so wishy-washy?
I think it's mental, and I've said it all year long because people have told me that the bullpen stinks. And I said it's not a talent issue. I think there's a lot of talent there, and there's not a lot of innings. And the first month of the season is just used to see. It's an audition. It's like an American Idol open audition, and whoever performs well during those auditions gets to make it to the show, with the show being the SEC schedule. So now, if I'm coming out of the bullpen, all right, well, I'm only going to get 2 appearances this week, and I can't do bad, and I go out and I have a bad outing, and now I'm pressing in my next one. So I think, to me, it was just mental, because guys like Blake Purnell, you saw how good he was. Nick Figueroa, you've seen how good he was. Cleat Hartzog, I think he has maxed out the potential of what his body can do. We look at his spin rate when I sit next to the Yacker Tech. He has like elite MLB analytics with his spin rate. And had, I think, 12 strikeouts in like 6 1/3 innings going into last night, and then just has a bad outing. I think, to me, it's never been a talent issue. Florida's never lacked talent in arms since Kevin O'Sullivan's been here. I think guys are just pressing because there were only limited. There are so many arms in the bullpen and not enough innings to get them. And everyone knows if I don't perform well in February, I'm not going to play in the SEC in March.
Right. And now I'll kind of step back from just Florida, and I want to talk about more like the grand scope of baseball in general and like where we're at now. You've got a team like LSU that has been red hot. They've had similar bullpen issues, but it seems like they're hitting the ball better than we are to make up for it. Tennessee has gotten hot. Vanderbilt is Vanderbilt. Where do you see Florida falling in the SEC conversation? Do you think there's a chance to win that tournament in Hoover? Or where are we as far as national seeding? Do you still think we get a top 8 seed?
Well, I have to apologize. Tennessee was scuffling. They were sliding. And I tweeted, if Tennessee doesn't figure something out, they might miss Hoover, not miss the NCAA tournament. They might miss the SEC tournament. And ever since that, they have been bullying teams. So that's my bad, guys. I apologize.
At least you said it after we played them.
You're welcome for that. But this is the new USF. And I was like, USF's a bad team. And then they beat Florida, and I had to eat it from their fan base. This is the new USF, not USC, USF. I kind of looked at the schedules remaining. So the teams I think that can win it would be Vandy, South Carolina, Florida, and obviously LSU. LSU, I think, has the easiest schedule in terms of who they have left. I don't think Florida's schedule is easy, but I think it plays out really well for them. Texas A&M is really struggling. They haven't had an answer for who to bring in the bullpen. They haven't had guys hit consistently. They've just had a mess of a season. You have to go and play at their park, but they've just been bad. I think before last week, I said if you can win 5 out of 6, if you're the Gators, if you can win 5 out of 6 in the next 2 weekends, you have a chance to win the SEC. You have to play Vanderbilt, but you get Vanderbilt at home, which is a huge advantage. And then you go to Kentucky. So Florida, if they can win 2 out of 3 at Texas A&M, I think has a chance to control their own destiny. And then I went and looked at LSU's schedule. I don't have it pulled up right now, but LSU's schedule was very favorable the rest of the way. So you'd need LSU to slip up if you wanted to win the SEC outright. I don't think Florida will win the SEC tournament because I think by the time that Florida gets to Hoover, they will have already locked up a top 8 national seed. And at that point, Kevin O'Sullivan just wants to get his starting pitching rotation for regionals, get them their start. Hey, Brandon, you're going to go out and you're going to throw 75 in game 1. Hurston, you're going to throw 75 in game 2. Jack, game 3, you throw whatever. And then after that, you don't really care. You just want to get your pitchers ready. The only coach I knew that really, really loved winning that tournament was Paul Maneri at LSU. And he could be the number 1 team in the country. He didn't care. He would use all of his pitchers all the way up till Sunday. But it's just unfortunate because it would be cool if there was like an extra week before and you'd really see teams go after it and try to win it. But it's so many games and you're really just trying to.
And it's a slog in Hoover because it's going to rain. I mean, it's going to rain.
100%
it rains every year. If they just go to the Trop and play there on the roof, I'd rather them do that. But you build this mausoleum of baseball in Hoover. I totally get why you
it is a
want to play
mausoleum.
there. Yeah,
and they keep telling me they're like, oh, they put a bunch of money into it. I'm like, where? Where? I've been there a bunch.
Which mid-major program do you see having a really good chance to win the World Series, and why is it the Campbell Camels?
I love Campbell. I would have said Coastal until they had a rough week last week. I love Campbell. It might be the second best mascot in college baseball behind the Dirtbags.
Yeah, the Dirtbags.
Long Beach, Long Beach State. I really do like Campbell. Baseball is so interesting. And I've tried to explain this to people. They're like, it's embarrassing that you lost to USF. And I'm like, this isn't football. There's a lot of talent in baseball. There's only 11.7 scholarships. There's a lot of parity. Coastal Carolina won by throwing, I forget the guy's name, but throwing a pitcher. He was throwing 130 pitches and coming back on 3 days rest and throwing again. A guy can just twirl a great game and neutralize you. But there's a couple teams. I would not want, if I'm a Florida fan, I would not want to see FGCU in a Gainesville regional.
Yeah.
They're Dunk City. They're Bomb City this year. They're leading the country in home runs. They're a legit team. There's a bunch of teams in the state of Florida that I think could make a run, but I think Campbell's probably up there. I'd say Campbell and Coastal.
Yeah. Wes, you have some questions you want to ask, Nick?
Yeah, you kind of alluded to one of my questions about the tiers. So I live in South Carolina, of course, and we came down here a couple weeks ago and got swept. So and there's a lot of talk. Of course, Vanderbilt is always the class, and then LSU is up there. Do you put Florida in that class with LSU, with Vandy, and with South Carolina, or are we in the second tier?
This year or overall?
This year.
Yeah, no, Florida's there's nobody that's outclassing Florida. And I think they're on par with LSU. I think I would love to see Florida and South Carolina play in Hoover. South Carolina, Founders Park is just an awesome environment, and they play so well there. I think they're 24-1 at home, with the only loss at home being to LSU this year.
There's nothing else here, so they care about the Gamecocks a lot. So that's all they have.
And they had a really good program. They had a bunch of guys throw really, really well. So to me, it's hard. The SEC East specifically is really, really good this year. Sully and Corbs, it's a little easier at Vanderbilt with the kind of grants and things they have, being a public school. Or a private school. They don't have to really abide to that 11.7 scholarships because they've all kinds of other stuff. So they'll always have a good program. especially as long as Corbs is there. But yeah, I would not say that Florida is second fiddle to any team in the SEC.
And my last question is Catalon the best player in college baseball this year?
No. I think Dylan Cruz is. Paul Skeens.
I was about to say Skeens is probably the one I would definitely say.
But to me, it's Dylan Cruz. He was hitting over 500 35 games into the season.
I saw a mock draft today where he was number 2 and Wyatt was number 3, and I can't remember who was number 1.
Yeah, Skeens.
Skeens. I think it probably was.
Skeens, yeah,
I don't know the names like you guys do, but I saw,
yeah, I'd have to do research, and I'm not going to because I don't cover LSU. But I don't know if a college team has ever had guys go 1-2 in the draft, and right now I think that is the most likely option, that you'll get 1-2 from LSU. And I think Wyatt Langford, I don't know if we'll go 3, but I think Wyatt Langford's certainly a top 10 pick.
Yeah, they had him listed as missing a portion of time this season with a midsection injury. I just thought was the most comical explanation of that injury I've ever seen.
But below the armpits, above the knees, somewhere in there.
You got hit where you never want to get hit with a baseball.
He was deflated. Let's just say that. He was out with
poor guy.
Flinched.
And I'll ask, this will be my last question. How important was the COVID extra year to college baseball right now? Because we saw it last year with Tennessee. Do you see that really why LSU is stacked as they are right now, from a lot of guys just having that extra year to play?
Well, it threw it into whack because then you add the transfer portal on top of it. And then you add NIL. I think LSU is really stacked right now because they had an awesome NIL movement for baseball. Those people down there, fine folks in Louisiana, they love baseball. Got Tommy Tanks, got Paul Skeens. They got a bunch of guys from the portal. The portal is going to be interesting for Florida because I think BT Riopel was kind of like a science experiment for Sully. Like, can this work? They've recruited so well at the high school level, they didn't know that they needed to use the portal. And then they went to Georgia, or they went to Jacksonville to play Georgia in the fall game one year. And you look at Georgia's lineup, and everyone was graduates and seniors and juniors. And the graduates were 6-year seniors. And now you've got a bunch of really good guys, but they're 17, 18 years old playing against 24-year-old men. So the transfer portal and the COVID year, I think, have made teams like Campbell, teams like mid-major teams, be able to compete more, because now you've got guys who have been playing together for 5-6 years. And they're staying in college because a lot of those guys might not have great pro prospects. So I think it's created even more parity in a sport that's had a bunch of parity, while also giving coaches immeasurable headaches, because then you had the draft was shortened. Well, we had a class that we didn't think the draft was going to be shortened, so we signed too many, and we had to send guys to go elsewhere. So it's been a mess. All the coaches I've talked to are looking forward to all the guys with COVID eligibility left to be done and to be out, so they can kind of get back to their normal way of life. Because Florida had to have some tough conversations with a lot of people after that 2020 draft, when it was supposed to be 40 some rounds and they only did 5. And now you're getting your entire draft class showing up to campus, and you got to tell guys who are on campus, hey, we don't have any money left for you. And then you're hitting the portal. And then they had the extra year left. So now they've got 4 years left or 3 years left. So the COVID year threw a bigger wrench into baseball, specifically because of the scholarships, than it did in any other sport, I think.
That's it for me, guys, unless you guys have any questions for Nick.
No, man, y'all guys covered it. I just enjoyed – I just sat back and enjoyed listening, man, because this year has really brought me into the college baseball world more than any other season. And Jack specifically, just watching Jack just put it out there, man. Like, I always watched when Pete was out there and Jonathan India and a bunch of the aforementioned guys. But this year, man, I've just really enjoyed following the chase and watching Nick cover it night to night. Nick's always on point with his baseball coverage.
Well, there's I just got the text. I was going to wait for it. There's a new, you said Alma Mater was a sponsor. There's a new Jack Tani. I think they just tweeted about it. A new Jack Tani shirt from Alma Mater.
Awesome.
Oh, man.
That's great.
That's great.
We'll have to check that out, guys. We'll have the link for you in our on Twitter tomorrow, so you can go get that Jack Tawny T-shirt, man, and support these guys. Like we said, alma mater is really unique in that they give money back to these young men through NIL opportunities. So we always want to support not only Gator businesses but our Gator athletes. Guys, you got anything else you want to add before we jump?
I think we covered it, man.
Think y'all got it?
Just appreciate you, Nick. Always. I think this is your second time on the show, so
yeah,
time, man.
Nick, we sure do. We appreciate having you on, man. Nick, tell the people where they can find you at, man.
I don't know. Depending on what take I have on what day, I don't know if I want people to find me. It's just at Torre, my last name on Twitter. You can find us, everything we write, and me and Zach's podcast at Gators Online. It's on the On3 network. And then, of course, same corner, same time with Silk and Dan on Stadium and Gale.
Yeah, if there's a bad take, remember it was Dan.
It was always Dan.
It's always Dan.
It was
always Dan.
It was Dan.
John Ruiz hates Florida because of Dan.
Yeah,
it's all Dan's fault. He poked the bear.
We're working on a GoFundMe for Dan since his investment has gone south.
Yeah,
hey, I own 2 shares myself. I'm really saddened by the way this is trending. Oh man, Nick, we sure do appreciate having you on, man. It's always a pleasure. We appreciate all the information you bring to the table for us, man. We can't wait to have you on again, maybe sometime after Friday Night Lights or after we go to the World Series and win it. We'll have you back on.
That's right.
I'm getting married, and I'll be in Europe after that. That's a whole nother issue. Getting married.
You'll understand. Take the laptop. We'll hook it up.
I'm getting married June 30th, and I think if it goes to 3 games, the last game of the College World Series would be June 26th or 27th. And I'm not getting married in Omaha.
Man, I tell you what, UF tried to really stick it to you by moving up Friday night.
Sure you don't want to get married in beautiful Omaha, Nebraska?
Well, you know what? If I'm in Omaha, Nebraska on June 30th, they might as well bury me because I'm not getting married.
I hear the corn is beautiful in Nebraska around there.
Yeah, they're gonna leave Nick in it.
I'll be the fertilizer. The corn will grow quick because I will be fertilizer if I'm in Nebraska.
Field of Dreams out there.
Yeah, there you go.
What's the name of that show, that movie with where he buried his wife in the cornfield, eating the corn? I can't remember.
Wes is going way off the rails. We're gonna just have to cut him off. Somebody mute Wes.
I can't remember,
man. I appreciate y'all for having me on.
Yeah, man.
Thank you so much, Nick. We appreciate it, brother. Guys, as always, we appreciate you tuning in, man, and listening to us talk a little football and a lot more baseball in this episode. It's a passion, for CJ every week to bring you the week that was in Gator baseball. CJ, you got anything before we jump out?
I just want to make sure you guys know that you're always supporting us as creators. Make sure that you leave a like, you leave a comment, and you subscribe. Next week, we're going to give away the hat. We're giving away the hat. We're drawing. If your name's not in the hat now, too late. You missed out. You don't get the Sunday white hat. You don't get it unless you go and use our link in the description and go buy it from our friends at Alma Mater. It is a beautiful hat with the Florida script on the front. And one of you guys are going to win it. And you're going to follow our Twitter page, follow the Facebook, get the updates on what's going on with that, and we're sending it out. If you don't respond to us, if you win the drawing, we're going to have to move on to pick somebody else. So you guys better make sure you're paying attention. You got your notifications on. Check out the Patreon if you haven't done that. Check us out on Twitter. I'm sure me, Wes, and Hirsch are going to, be happy to banter back and forth with you guys on Twitter. You can check Nick out at Twitter as well. He's always got some banter.
Banter.
So just make sure you guys are always supporting us as a creator. It helps us out a bunch, and we're on the road to 1,000 subscribers. We're right on the edge. Maybe Nick can give us the push here, get us right over the edge here. And help
a lot
us
of
out
power on Nick, a lot of pressure on Nick.
That's right. Nick Torre's got all the answers, man. But thank you guys so much. We really appreciate all the support.
Yes, sir. Wes, take us home.
Yeah, as those guys said, we appreciate you for following us. Our subscriptions have moved up every week. Last week was our most watched episode, so I'm pretty sure that we have the marvelous Nick on here tonight. This is going to supersede what we had last week. And as Hirsch and CJ said, the link will be in the comments on YouTube. So if you don't see it on Twitter, if you don't have Twitter, go on YouTube in the comments and click that link for Alma Mater to purchase anything you want from. Just view the website. It might be candles, it might be jerseys, it could be anything.
Man said candles.
Yeah, well, the candles are on there. It may be for your wife. Mother's Day is coming up. Mother's Day is
For the man too. If you like to smell the candle, man. You know?
So that's on there, man. So
I like a good candle.
yeah, man. So, might have to set the mood right for Sunday. So who knows? But do that. And as always, this is a podcast that support our troops. So thank you to all our troops out there that are giving us the ability to do what we do, which is be free and give this feedback as far as what's going on in Gator Nation baseball around the bases with CJ and now Nick tonight featuring. And as far as our recruiting, as far as respect our decisions. So we thank you guys. We salute you guys. And as always, go Gators.
Go Gators.
Go Gators.